the other fascinating phenomenon which I've noticed really very strongly in recent years, and I imagine you will have done as well, is the way in which people who are habituated to reading online and to the way information comes at you online are primed for the kind of pattern recognition which makes perceiving formal cause directly vastly easier than it is for people who are habituated to print. I'm sure you can understand what I'm talking about. I mean, I think it's not a coincidence that your line of work, your artistic line of work, has really exploded back into the public consciousness, the form of iconography. People are once again able to read iconography for what it is, in a way which just wasn't possible at peak modernity, because the people didn't understand that what that kind of art was for and what really it was communicating. But if you consume content on the internet, there's so much of it. It's just like a fire hose, and you stand there in this kind of fire hose of stuff that comes at you, and some of it's just complete nonsense and gibberish or hate or craziness or whatever, and some of it's real gems, and all you can really do is just stand there and trust in your sort of whimsical ability to filter and to catch gems as the torrent comes at you, and to make sense of it as it comes at you. And people attain, in the same way as people attain prominence as authors in the print age, people attain prominence as sense makers in the digital age, just by virtue of being able or willing or foolish enough to stand in the fire hose and then catch things as they go by and assemble them into some kind of a coherent narrative for people who just don't have time or the inclination to do that. And it's an evolution, if you like, of the author role, but it's a cognate of what an author does. But even people who don't do that are primed just by being extremely online and having, I'm sort of gesturing just to convey the fire hose thing at you. Even people who don't want to be sense makers just get used to seeing ideas evolve in real time online. And I think the most vivid illustration of this is memes. Yeah. You think of Pepe the Frog, who's a very famous one, who evolves at great speed and interacts with other memes, and new forms evolve. And there have been recently, there was the whole JD Vance thing, which I thought was very funny. And you can watch something like that follow a sort of a kind of conceptual arc over a period of 2 or 3 weeks, during which a huge amount happens. And I guess some people are just like, well, what on earth was that? But for other people, really, it's not a huge step from being able to watch an idea come to life and move and develop and sometimes have tangible effects in the real world, and then being able to perceive that, to be able to perceive formal cause in, for example, the being of a particular animal species or within ecosystems in the natural world. It's just not a very big conceptual leap, right? And similarly, it's not a very big conceptual leap from that to understanding how iconography of the type that you create works. Because I mean, it's hopelessly reductive to describe what you do as creating spiritual memes, but in a sense, you're engaging in a kind of memeplex which is vastly older than the internet. And that requires a huge amount of skill and devotion to work with, but it's a memeplex, and I think and people just understand that instinctively in a way which wasn't the case for a long time.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely something happening, and I've mentioned that often in terms of the internet, that it's a dual thing that's going on. On the one hand, we're going towards this weird moment when people don't know who they are and don't know what a person is, have no idea what intelligence is or agency, like they're just losing all of that. But it's also forcing certain people, at least a certain class of people, to actually realize exactly that. And so when you notice, for example, you can imagine that in 300 years ago, a very wise person that meditated or prayed for very long times would be able to perceive these patterns that run through culture and would be able to see them as being coherent and have formal causes, be able to see kind of the intelligence that runs through them, even agency that runs through them. But now, because everything's accelerated so much, like you said, something that an ancient person might have seen over a century by just meditating over certain patterns that they see happening over a century, that would have been captured in things like astrology and different types of other ways of capturing that. Now it's like a few weeks. Now a few weeks you see an agency run through. and it's like
Yeah.
you can just see it. It flames and then it vanishes. And so
Yeah.
the idea that these have no, for example, the idea that these are just trying to reduce them and to try to understand them in a reductionist way is not useful, because you're not understanding anything. You forced to think of these as having a type of reality that brings us back exactly to what you were saying, which is something like formal cause.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. In a sense, it doesn't matter whether what we're looking at is an emergent property of multiple consciousnesses all thinking about similar things, or whether in fact it has an independent agency in its own right. In a sense, it doesn't matter, because it looks more or less the same either way.
Yeah, but it's better to treat it as agency, because that's the way you can understand it. Because trying to treat it as emergent properties of multiple intelligences doesn't help you deal with it. No. It's better to deal with it as a singular thing that's running through. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And
that's
again,
why the purpose thing that you said is perfect. Like, if you can say there is purpose in understanding this as a unitary intelligence that's running through bodies, and that's kind of cohering them towards purposes, and there's a purpose in doing that too. You can help people understand that the soul is not some magical thing that drops down and that you could, it's not ectoplasm or whatever nonsense that happened in the time of the Spiritists. It is exactly what we're talking about.
It's just a form of a thing.
It's seeing the purpose, it's seeing it come together, and that's even how the Church Fathers, many of them, talked about it. It's not like this is something that we're coming up with now. It's just that we lost the capacity to understand that for a while.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.